Hey everybody, this is Eric Enge. I am the CEO of Stone Temple Consulting. I'm here with Mark Traphagen.
You're literally here with Mark Traphagen.
Yes, indeed. And we're actually together at the Mozplex in Seattle. We're about to go to SMX Advanced and we're hanging out. But hanging out. But in any case, with us in what I'll call almost First Tuesday, is David Amerland. David.
Hey, hello, and it is almost First Tuesday. You're right. It's close enough to be the real thing.
And that might have gone by some people really fast. What Eric just said, but I promised people in my shares today that there would be a surprise, and that was a surprise. We are here at the Mozplex, headquarters of Moz. Rand Fishkin is somewhere nearby. You can feel the presence. There is so much coolness, just like 10 feet that way, that we can't even describe it. So that's where we are today together. It's pretty cool to be together always, but in this place is really awesome.
And if you look right here, that's right where the password was to the Wi-Fi before we erased it, right before showtime.
So they said to us about 20 times, "You're going to erase that, right?"
Yeah, after we show it to everybody. So this week, it's Give Me Structure or Give Me Death, and we are the doctors of search here to help you with that. If we've been smart, we would have run around and gotten white coats, but instead we're all dressed in black, it seems.
Yeah, kind of more like the mortician of the search.
It's not even by agreement, right? That's really cool.
Yeah, we're at the other end of it. We're the morticians of search. So we decided that we weren't going to get structure, so we got death. Yeah. And I guess that's the way that goes.
That's it. So we can log off now.
That's the end of the show, everybody. In fact, there will be no further episodes.
End of the interview.
Thank you for attending.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we want to talk about actually structured data and semantic search together. That's really what we want to talk about, right? And I mean, there's a lot you can do in semantic search without structured data, and search engines are pretty smart about doing that stuff. But structured data is kind of like, I don't know, the steroids of semantic search, maybe. I'm going to try keep these things, medical in some fashion.
I like the alliteration too, the steroids of semantic search. It's working really well.
SSS, too.
That sounds really good, yes.
So what do you think, David? Why don't you talk a little bit about how structured data really helps feed and accelerate semantic search?
Okay. Let's formalize something.
You're a little faint, by the way, again.
What is that?
You're a little faint. You're not coming through.
Okay. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. Yeah, it's been a long day, so I'm fading a little bit. I need one of those steroid things. Okay. Let's formalize something, and essentially, we can't talk about semantic search without structured data. And although we have, to a point up to now, what is happening is that a lot of the unstructured data, which is most of us, the websites we haven't really got formalized markup, the social media web space, a lot of the photo sharing that's going on, and all those apps that are come about. Essentially, all that which is indexed then gets structured inside Google's index. So basically, Google is building a structured data index of the unstructured data web, which is why we talk about Google's version of the semantic web. So essentially, semantic search is all about structured data. It's just that we don't get to see it because Google does all the heavy lifting, and we just get to do all the easy things, like share pictures and put up posts and make them pretty and talk about them. But behind all that, there is right now an element. I mean, obviously, schema.org is one of the. It was founded by Google and Microsoft and Yahoo, and schema.org has been promoting the semantic search markup or the semantic markup across the web using schema.org markup. And what's happening at the moment, we're seeing a maturation of the process in terms of some of the large industry verticals, and a little bit is happening behind the scenes, which is going to have an impact on search. So let's clarify what that is. Essentially, if we're talking about schema.org markup, it's a way of tagging your data in a way that it makes sense internally, so that everything has the same labels, so everybody knows what they're talking about. If you're looking at different databases, they can communicate with each other, and then creating classifications of those called ontologies, which help group them and they make them easier to classify. The moment you do that, you basically make it easier for Google to index all this, understand what you're about, and give you a big boost in search. And there's a question here which always comes up. If you have structured data in place, is it going to be a ranking signal? Okay, it's not. Okay, it never has been. But like in the past, clean HTML was a signal to Google that you took care of your website. It made it easier to actually index what you were doing, and it helped boost you in search because of this indexing ease. The same way, if you have semantic search markup, it will help Google understand better and faster what you're doing, which means that it will help you in search, it'll help you in terms of ranking, because you'll be able, Google will be able to understand what you're doing better and easier. All of these lead back to the three things we've always been talking about: trust, authority, and ultimately reputation. Why? Because essentially, if you're running any kind of business, in order to clearly understand internally how you communicate, you need to streamline and clarify the process, which then gets you in an internal dialogue of the things you do, how you do them, the product names you have, the project names you have, how you market these. And this clarification begins to inform your formation of identity on the web, which also then helps you project it better in your marketing. So we see a clarity, basically, which comes from a very formalized background now, which is beginning to take shape. Research shows at the moment that from the authoritative websites across the web, large website verticals, which are companies in the, websites in the finance industry and in the automotive industry, a full 25% of them, that's 1 in 4, actually employ some kind of semantic search markup, usually schema, schema.org markup. And the reason they do that is because it will help them in search. So basically they're gaining an advantage in terms of clarification of what they do, but also this is forcing them to streamline a lot of communication problems they had in the past, where a car in one area had a different product number with another car in a different area, and used to create all sorts of conflicts and misunderstandings, which, if you view them from an indexing point of view, it created a certain kind of mistrust, perhaps, in data that didn't seem to match up. Now this data will actually match up. So if you have a company with 3 different websites, everything makes sense, all the dots are dotted, all the T's are crossed. This begins to become a vote of confidence in terms of what Google sees in what you do as a company. And this affects also small businesses as well, because they should be thinking along similar kind of clarification and streamlining in their processes.
Yeah, so a couple of things in there. One is, as you said, it doesn't impact rankings per se, but it can impact presentation in the search results, right? And
yes.
It takes a few different forms. One of the good classic examples is we search on a recipe of some sort, and recipes come up, and some of the listings might show you, the calories of the resulting dish and how long it takes to cook, and these kinds of things. So there's that sort of impact. And you're right, there also could be a second kind of impact, which, to our knowledge, and I don't anticipate that this knowledge is incorrect, but I'm just putting the qualifiers on it for sake of preciseness. It doesn't impact ranking, but it's like, okay, you walk into a hospital, I'm going back to a medical analogy, and there's bloody bandages all over the place, carpets turned over, the place is kind of a mess. And then you walk into another hospital, and it's just clean, neat, ordered, organized. One gives you more confidence. And so this process of crafting a web page and treating the code like a work of art, and treating the the user experience like work of art, including the markup and all that. Clearly, there's no downside to that.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right in what you said. I mean, it is how you create a kind of trust and confidence and authority, which then makes you informs the entity which you become on the web, and it helps Google have greater confidence in presenting what you do. There are a couple of things here to bear in mind. The moment we mention any kind of semantic search markup, unless you're a little bit familiar with programming, for the average web user, it's really difficult at the moment to employ, simply because there's no CMS which will do it. I think there's a couple of plugins for either WordPress or Joomla which will allow you to sort of introduce semantic markup, but this is a layer, basically, which produces a little bit of dirty HTML as a result. So although it's a win, it's not a really big win. And if that's the only thing you can do, fine. I think you should be implementing it. So the question comes, what should you be doing if you can't program? You don't want to learn to program. You don't want to get a programmer, and you still need to implement some kind of semantic search markup. And here, basically, is where you need to be clever, because essentially everything that we do with semantic with schema markup or microdata or microformats, which are the different sort of versions of markup that can be employed, what we do is we create clarity, we create consistency, and we create what we call ontologies, which means classifications. If you're doing anything in terms of marketing, content creation, products, product ranges, all those things should be part of your approach to what you do. So basically, you should be classifying these things, you should be putting them in categories, you should create consistencies within those categories, both in approach, and tone, and in content, and in what you say. And these don't take programming, they just take thinking and organizing. So basically, if you are not going to implement anything like this, this is what you should be doing. If you have static pages on your website, which are either event pages or product pages, or even reviews or anything like this, Google does actually give you a semantic search markup tool in the Webmaster Tools, where you can bring up your website page, you can tell Google what each element is there, is identified as, whether it's a product or a review, or if it's an image, or if it's a price, and then Google takes that as a semantic search markup layer into its Webmaster Tools. Next time it crawls your website, it will index it as such, and it will classify it as structured data in its index.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to do a quick screen share of part of the schema.org spec for just one form of markup, and very quickly you realize that there's like a lot of stuff to think about here.
Yes. And actually, I'm interjecting here, but I'm very glad you brought this up, because even if somebody isn't very, is not conversing with programming, and they're never going to get their hands dirty with code, just going through all those identifiers, which basically go into forming an organization, helps them begin to clarify the things that they need to project through their content. So it's a good thing to do.
So even if they don't use schema.org markup, you make sure the web pages has this kind of information on it, because
Yes.
now you know that that's the kind of content that the search engines are looking for.
Yes, exactly. So basically, we've always tried to make it easy for things to be found in search, and in some way, we always had to think a little bit like a search engine, and that means that we should be aware when the search engine crawler gets on the website, it's looking for very specific things. Those things need to be there. They need to be easy to find, they need to be easy to identify, and they need to be consistent across basically the website in terms of what it does. And that will help create that kind of semantic indexing process that Google likes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to push a question at you here, really just a statement from Tigran. I'm not going to try to say his last name. Well, it's actually not that, Kanzadayan. Data's never like that, David Amerlin. The real data is quite dirty.
Absolutely. Well, I totally agree with that. Data is really quite dirty. You're absolutely right. Which is why we go into all this schema markup, trying to clarify it and create a kind of indexing, which creates a lot of cleaner data verticals, if you like, for Google to index. Certainly, if you can actually apply that kind of programming to your website. If you can't, then the only solution that is viable is to try to create a kind of consistency, which will help with the entity extraction process once Google starts indexing the website.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and that's one of the, it's really one of the amazing things that Google has done. I mean, they're trying to help themselves with, schema.org markup, but the reality is that most people don't use it, and that actually leaves them with the task of trying to figure it out on their own. And that's why I so much like the suggestion you made earlier, which is if you don't have the programming chops to do that, then just actually go ahead and lay the data out in a less structured way, but structured in terms of the visible content of the web page. You're just not using schema.org. Now you had a question there.
Yeah, I'll read it off because we lost it from the comment tracker, but I'll just read it off. This is from Jan Willem Bovink. It says, what is your point of view on JSON LD, adding another way of marking up your data? Aren't semantic web enthusiasts creating too many opportunities which result in too much information for the average online marketer?
That's true. Now, JSON basically stands for JavaScript object notation, and it's a schema, it's a standard in its own right. And it's usually used for passing data between a server and a web application. Whenever you have any kind of API in place, we're having web apps, it should always be in place. But definitely, if you're not conversant with some of the syntax which is used, and schema.org is always very clear on all of this, you will be creating your own classifications sometimes, which Google may not see as in terms of what is accepted. I was just last week I was present during a workshop where we're trying to create very specific classifications for one of the industry verticals, and what came across was that, and we're using JSON basically to do that, and what came across is that some of the standards which they needed are not still in place, and they're not supported by Google, which brings up a few questions as to how effective they'll be as we move into the future. Did I answer the question? We're sort of thinking something else, and
yeah, I think so. In terms of it gives people the picture that it gives people the picture that there's it's not a cut and dried thing at this point.
No, it's not. There's a lot of.
Has Google even published any kind of definitive list on what they do use and what they don't use as far as markup?
Well, Google supports schema. It supports very specific aspects of it, and then they sort of through the Google forums they sometimes acknowledge specific ones which they support. But what's happening with the industry? With industries which have a certain depth, like if we talk about the finance industry or the automotive industry, where they have a lot of needs and they have a lot of attributes in their products, they are having at the moment to define their own identifiers of how they're going to basically classify things. And obviously at some point there'll be either an acceptance of these, or there'll be some sort of translation across the indexing process. But right now it's a very gray area because it's so new, and Google isn't a lot of help there, I must say.
Indeed. By the way, here's a follow-up comment from Denver Prophet Jr. on the I lost it already. We didn't want to answer it, Denver. I'm just kidding. So the notion about the use of JSON here, that would add a layer of syntax upon another layer of HTML syntax and double the processing, wouldn't it?
Yes, although I think, if that's a comment on the loading time aspect of websites, because it can actually affect loading speeds. I think what it adds in terms of that is negligible in most cases, and certainly there are other things which can be done to sort of negate it if it's necessary to do that. But certainly one of the things which we are going to get into before too long is actually creating very clean semantic markup code, because right now there are a lot of inconsistencies which create essentially very dirty data, very dirty HTML. I don't think it matters very much right now, but as we move forward, Google would actually be looking at that in terms of implementation in order to ascertain quality aspects, and those quality aspects will then go to inform, again, trust, authority, credibility, which those will play a role in terms of ranking.
Yeah, it's interesting. We just we have a client. I can't actually say who they are, but they're a very large video sharing network, not named YouTube. Just for clarity's sake on that part.
Really trying to get YouTube as a client.
Yeah, well, there you go. And they had a problem with indexing time, and then we went through the code, and we saw structural flaws and just actually a little bit of sloppiness in the implementation of the code. One of the first things we did was we went through and basically got them to clean that up. A little early to tell, but it looks like it's at least having an impact on the things that they were interested in resolving, which is a good thing. Okay, we are getting a question pushed. Okay, it's becoming more important now for businesses to use schema markup in their web code. How does that leave business owners without the knowledge? Doesn't it put them at a disadvantage? Yeah, I think they should just drop off the web.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, now that's a very good question because
because people hear about this and say, well, I don't have any idea how to implement that. Am I going to get left behind? Am I not going to be able to rank in Google or do well in search because I don't know yet how to implement this kind of markup on my site?
No, I agree. Yeah. Great question, Peter. I was just kidding you. Okay, David, what do you say about that?
Well, here's the answer to this. Implementing semantic markup, whether it's schema or microdata or microformats or JSON, whatever you actually implement, isn't going to give you a ranking advantage. What it may give you is basically an organizational advantage, which will then inform pretty much everything else you do in terms of how you market yourself, in terms of how you communicate, and that will have an impact in how you're perceived, which will lead to greater engagement, citations, authority, which will then inform search. And the reason I mentioned this kind of chain of events is that basically if we take the schema.org or the semantic search markup out of the picture, then that chain still needs to be created, and it starts with content, and it starts with an understanding of what you do as a business. So basically, if you can't do this, you think, okay, I can't implement semantic search markup, semantic markup on my website, what do I do? Well, then you go back to basics, you understand exactly what your business does, you create consistency in your communication and branding, which is very important, and then you work hard to make sure that that is translated across everything you do, and that should basically be treated the same. And Google, and Peter Hatherley has said that on the stream, I can see that Google actually takes a semantic search snapshot of websites and the content independent of schema.org, and this is true because essentially Google looks at the website, it indexes it, it takes the unstructured data into a structured data format, so it carries out a certain form of entity extraction from the content it finds there, and it compares that to see exactly how your information is formed and how credible it is. So you don't really need it. If you can do it, great. If you can't do it, understand its impact. This is the whole point of this. The whole point of the Hangout is not to say, hey guys, semantic search markup is important, go and implement it, because that would be very easy to say and hard to do, and there's no point to it. But the impact of it is essentially we're dealing with organizations, we're dealing with taxonomies, we're dealing with ontologies, we're dealing with groupings, and your content, your business identity, your branding needs to have a kind of cohesive approach, which I must admit I don't see in large corporations at the moment. I come across them, and they're fragmented. They do different things. They have different project names for internal projects, so they don't communicate well internally, let alone externally. They have different product names for the same product across different markets, and they don't even know it's the same product. So, if you get on the web and you're calling one product XYZ and the other product is ABC, and they're the same product, and you think, heck, what's going on? Now, think about all this from a search point of view. You're creating conflicts in what you're presenting. And the moment you create any kind of conflict like that, Google's confidence in the information it has about you drops, because it has to reconcile different things, and it takes time, it takes a lot of information, and this is where the problems arise. So essentially, you need to clarify your content, your marketing, your branding, and make sure that everything happens according to a very specific plan.
So let me give an example of this that most people don't think of as, certainly don't think of as schema, and they might not think about it as semantic search, but in local search, one of the things that's incredibly important is that your information be shown across the web in a very consistent fashion. But people talk about your name, address, and phone number, and they call that your NAP, right? And so
yes.
Your NAP needs to show up, or it's not something you're going to take now, David. I know it's 11 o'clock at night where you are, but you are not taking a nap now, okay?
No, absolutely not. I'm caffeinated.
Right over to that Google Plus pillow behind you, and that'll be it. Then it'll be up to Mark and I to finish the show. But you want your NAP information on the web pages of your website, but you also want the business listing directories across the web to show it the same way, right? And that's an incredibly important thing to do, and it's an incredibly important ranking factor in local search. Just to back up what you were saying a moment ago, David, if the information is shown differently in two different directories from what's on your site, Google loses confidence that the information is accurate. And that actually can impact your ranking, because Google does not want to show things at the top of local search if they're afraid that they're giving the person who sees it a wrong phone number or a wrong address. They don't want someone to drive over there and find an empty storefront because you moved 3 months ago.
Yeah, so it's exactly right. I mean, we're talking about basic things like, opening hours, for instance, which, they can, I've seen them, for instance, I've seen them on the website of a restaurant or restaurant site being different from the local pages of the same restaurant site. So, it's like, whoa, guys. And, basically it's a case of updating it. And I understand the reason for that, because, to update a local page listing is a lot easier than to update the website if you don't have access to the CMS and you're using a developer. But it's that kind of consistency now which needs to be created. So essentially we're talking about, from a small to medium business point of view, we're talking about creating basic processes which allow consistency in content to come across, consistency in updates, consistency in tone of voice, consistency in the products and services which are displayed and how they're talked about. And then that informs basically marketing, social media network presentations, any kind of presence which you have on the web, and that goes into generating the identity, which then feeds back into the very human things we're talking about: trust, authority, reputation, how you talk, and how you're perceived. So, this is how it goes.
Right. So you're doing two things, right? You're crafting your web pages with great care, and you are crafting your marketing messages with great care, and this is something that has always had a benefit. But when you talk about getting into semantic search, right, that consistency is very, very important. You'll notice here at Stone Temple Consulting that we always talk about digital marketing excellence, right? So, and so we have the Digital Marketing Excellence Show, and this is when we started the second show, this one, we made it to Digital Marketing Answers Show. And then, of course, the tagline of the website is Digital Marketing Excellence. And so consistent theming is very, very important.
Yeah.
So I'm going to actually now ask you the same question twice. So be patient. Let me ask it the first time.
Okay.
Bob Strassel Jr., any issues with mixing types of structured data? I've geotagged my pages, but if I implemented any other structured data, will it jive? So that's one. And then the other one is from Bill Verboom, which I think is the same question. Is there danger with over-optimizing your site with too many related schema types? Oh, they're related. They're not exactly the same question. One's about too much schema,
Okay.
one's about different kinds of markup.
This is a great question. The real answer to this, the honest answer is I don't know, because we don't have sufficient data. We've discussed it internally. I've discussed this with experts in depth, and we haven't really crystallized to any kind of opinion. But here's the thing. I mean, why are you using overlaying different types of schema when one of your goals is to actually achieve consistency? Because let's look at it. You know, if you're applying, for instance, microdata or microformats, which are all different things, although they're all semantic markup, because microformats is an entity and microdata is a specification, RDFA is a language, schema.org is a vocabulary. So essentially, if you are using different types of overlays, I think you're going to end up with a sort of non-clear approach to what you're doing, which will eventually impact negatively on search. I think right now it doesn't matter because it's too soon and too early. But as we're moving forward, those who have a clearer grasp on this will actually move forward and do it better. And I think, you know, Google has basically come down on the side of microdata when it comes to implementing any kind of schema.org markup, simply because if you used the alternatives like RDFA, they discovered that because of the ambiguities in the language, the human error factor rose by 40%. And that gives you a signal that basically what Google is looking at is consistency and as error-free approach as possible. So if you're using different languages and they're sort of overlaying each other, I mean, apart from anything else, you're probably opening up yourself to that kind of issue.
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to keep firing questions away because we're getting a lot of good discussion points from the audience. I'm going to just go back to this one from Denver Prophet Jr. asking about so many domain purchases we see the web hosting by the domain privacy. Should the domain registration match your local Google Plus page? So Denver, I'll share with you my philosophy on that. I actually am always transparently put name and address information in my domain. My Whois information is always publicly viewable, you know, to me, it just makes sense because that way Google can create a tie. I want them to create a tie between the various web properties that I own. Personally, I think that's a benefit.
Yep, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so another one from Jeffrey Dodd here. Oops, I double-clicked it fast. Did you read that?
No, that was very quick. My eyes don't work that fast yet.
That's right. Okay, the use of schema semantic.
Okay, I'm reading it now.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
you know, I mean, guys, the whole thing about semantic search is that any shortcut which you may think of will simply not work. So there you go.
Yeah. All right. So, oh, here's an interesting question. I'm implying that all the other questions we've had so far weren't interesting.
Finally, we got interesting.
Sorry, everybody else. I didn't mean it to come out that way. But in any case, do you expect structured data will ever be a part of AdWords quality scores for Drive Ads?
Well, again, too early to tell. Historically, we know that Google basically does that. It looks at, you know, what works in SEO in terms of quality, what works on and then it applies that in quality scores in AdWords. So, you know, the answer is an informed, possibly yes.
Yeah, I suspect it really will. Google will find ways to take advantage of things that gives it greater clarity about who you are and the like. You can imagine a organization rank. They probably have such a thing for your history based on what you've done in paid search, and that could become a factor because for them, when you look at AdWords, what they're really trying to get at is something that ultimately makes them the most money. And if they could start to get signals that tell them when you first put up an ad, what's the likelihood that it's going to get clicked on because of who you are and how you project yourself online. I'm sure they're already doing this at some level, but they could do some things to enhance that, right?
Yeah, that's what he's referring to, is that some people may not be aware that there's a quality score within AdWords that affects part of the equation of how much an advertiser has to pay to get an ad in a certain position on the page. And the higher your quality score is, the less you pay to get a higher position. One of the factors that they actually do look at, it's been for a while now, is they do look ahead at the landing page the ad goes to, and they do some kind of quality assessment of the landing page. That's why that question was asked. Could this play into that accuracy of information as shown by the structured data? It's quite plausible. We don't know all what they're looking at, so.
Well, something else worth mentioning too is schema.org is this enormously elaborate spec that covers all kinds of different things that you can mark up, many of which the search engines aren't using yet. And it is worth mentioning, we are talking mostly about Google here, but it's something that Google and Bing collaborated on, right? And it's jointly agreed upon between both of them.
And Yahoo, yeah.
Yahoo also, yeah.
Oh, and Yahoo, I'm sorry.
You forget that.
Yeah. All right, yeah, I got it.
You're so bad.
Yahoo!
There you go. All right, I need practice on all that. But yeah, so it's a great. There's a great deal of stuff there that they're not currently using, and over time they'll begin to use more and more of it. That's just something to be aware of, and you have to do a little fishing around to find out what they're actually using currently in terms of marking up the results.
David, let me throw at you a question of my own, kind of a future-facing question. This is a crystal ball question, so
okay.
I expect there's no wrong or right answer here. Just with all that you look at and what you've written on semantic search, where Google seems to be going, what they're doing with the natural language processing, all of these things. Do you foresee a day when no markup of this type will be necessary at all?
Everything Google does tends to point that way. Essentially, they hate having to rely on us to do anything because of two reasons. First of all, human error creeps in statistically, and as things become more complicated, that grows. And secondly, there's always a temptation to try and push the envelope a little bit, try to up it a little bit, and see what the benefits are. Which means, we're trying subconsciously perhaps to game the system, and Google knows that. So basically, what they really want to do is do away with anything which has to rely on us and do it themselves. At the moment, this is proving to be still difficult. They're getting better. So in the future, I suspect that it's a very strong yes. But bear in mind that also in the future, we're going to see a different kind of content management system come into existence. At the moment, we have content management systems which don't produce semantic markup because they didn't have to, but they allow us to do things which in the past we needed an entire team of developers to do, like create dynamic web pages and put them up very quickly. So I expect, within a 2 to 3 year period at the most, we will actually see semantic markup CMSs coming to the market. And again, the quality will be a little bit different. There'll be a question, which produces the cleaner code, which is more friendly, and which, all those things will come up again. And the moment that happens, I expect that Google will essentially deprecate much of the human-produced semantic search markup and basically rely on what they do themselves.
I asked that to really ask this question. Well, and then wouldn't it behoove for those people, give some hope maybe to those people who said, like, I don't understand this, I can't do this kind of markup. To do what we were talking about earlier, wouldn't it make sense to make your website just as clear to humans as possible in all of this data? So, making sure this is my contact information, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is, all the things that make it easier for humans to understand. Eventually, if I'm understanding what you're saying, David, will help Google and the other search engines to understand now what we might have to put semantic markup around to help them understand.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. I mean, it's as simple as that, really. And it sounds almost too easy to be a workable answer. But looking at large corporations, this is what we find when we actually do the forensics. We find that over time, different departments, different products, different managers have introduced slightly, for very many different reasons, their own notation within the corporation, which then seeps out into the marketing. So you end up with having, your company market different things in a different way to different audiences. And although in the compartmentalized world of the past this made sense, now it doesn't. So now those practices need to be basically changed and integrated into a holistic approach, which is taking time because it produces internal friction. So this is in large corporations. This will take quite a bit of time, but it also this fragmented approach is also present in smaller companies, which simply in the past followed the example of their much larger rivals. So now we're having to go back and do that very simple thing. So for instance, if you're selling cars, for instance, I should know exactly what kind of car you're selling. I shouldn't have to worry, if you're calling it A today and B tomorrow, and those two are different cars, and which one am I buying, A or B, and what's the difference, and those things.
Okay, I'm going to fire up another question here. So I don't think the whole thing's going to fit, but I'll see. Okay, you got that right.
Yeah, yes. I'm getting better. I got the first word.
All right, what was it?
Let's have a look at this again.
All right, so here we go. And doesn't all fit, but actually, that was not the one from Denver I wanted to fire up, but I already did. So I'm not sure I know the answer to this one. I don't know if you do, David, but the question is for what's the right kind of markup to use for category pages on a blog, and I don't know the answer.
I'm not 100% sure because there's so many things still on the schema list. So basically, it's just going through schema.org categories and seeing what fits best. And I appreciate this is not a very clear answer. I totally appreciate this because, like I said, I spent a week discussing the gray areas of this with people actually engaged in creating semantic search, semantic markup in large, deep industry verticals. And they're actually having the same issues. They're saying, should we call it this or should we call it that? If we call it this, what's going to happen in the future? How easy is it to change? The only answer which makes sense right now is to go for the best possible description, which appears to have a longevity. And by that, I mean it appears to have an underlying logic that would allow it to stand in the future. And that's the best I can actually give you, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, here's the one from Denver that I actually meant to fire up at the moment. Okay, so he mentions a real SEO study. Basically, the question is when the SRT or closed caption content upload matches pretty much the speech-to-text machine-generated text, do you think that would impact ranking? So I think I can predict your answer based on the earlier conversations.
Yes. Well, anything which has consistency, certainly. And this is what you need to bear in mind. Okay, Google is basically looking at consistency in order to generate certainty. And the more the consistency builds, the greater the certainty, the greater the confidence, and then all these little things add up to higher ranks because Google has more confidence in the results of what your page is about. Yeah,
so it's worth drawing out because we've said at some level two different things, and I want to actually help explain that. One we've said is that data consistency can impact ranking. And then at the other times we've said that structured markup doesn't impact ranking. So yes. I want to just help people understand that we talk out of both sides of our mouths whenever it's convenient for us.
Yes.
Never answered you like question.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. I mean, you got to remember that the implementation of markup is not a ranking signal, and Google doesn't see it as such. All it does is it helps indexing, and therefore, the thing is, if you apply it consistently, then you begin to create a kind of internal clarity that begins to inform pretty much everything you do. So suddenly you become better. And I mean, the easiest way to describe it is as a discipline. We all know we have to be really disciplined in the way we create content, in the way we present it, in the way we market ourselves, in the way we basically put any of our marketing messages out there.
Well, and the way I look at it with Denver's question is, so Google does a speech-to-text translation, and they get the output, which they know is by definition somewhat imperfect, right?
Sometimes very imperfect.
Right. So when they get SRT data, which matches up really closely with that, then they can trust that SRT data and trust their translation. They reinforce each other, and hence they can gain more confidence in terms of deciding that that video is relevant to certain kinds of queries. So that's a situation where it can have an impact, as opposed to a different kind of situation where putting up a recipe schema is going to change your ranking from the 3rd position to the 1st position.
Yeah,
right.
I agree. Yeah, I'm just checking the comments there, and there's a really interesting dialogue going on in the stream, and I think this is fantastic because the question is, it comes back down to semantic markup. Is it going to help? Is it going to translate into a business advantage? And again, the short answer to this is yes, but it's going to help to become a business advantage because essentially it's a discipline which you apply. And as business people, we are drawn in so many different directions at once, particularly if it's a small to medium business, but even a large one, that it becomes very easy to become essentially undisciplined and certainly unfocused. And by having to apply internally the kind of methodology where the data you create, the clarity of the data creates its own demands in the way that you create groupings in what you do, clarifications, taxonomies, ontologies, all those things which help basically make your internal job easier and your marketing better. Those things will give you a business advantage in the future. And if we forget all this coding, if you're really disciplined as a business person, then basically your content is there, your marketing is spot on, your website is user-friendly, you don't do anything you shouldn't in terms of how you rank in search, and as a result, you have high confidence in Google, Google has high confidence in you, it ranks your website high, and all this is simply academic because you're doing everything right. But you have that discipline in place, and that's the key.
Yeah, so one more thing I'm going to fire up for you, which is, I think, a great question, because this is something that people talk about a lot these days. It's because Google's doing so much more with the knowledge graph and their one boxes. I mean, here at Moz, they actually published an article not that long ago about how they got some of their data actually pulled into a one box, and that the answer that they had given was being given now as a fact on the web. And so let me just read the question. How do we think about making it easier for Google to use our data by marking it up so they can throw that into their one boxes and use it without paying us anything and taking away the clicks from us? So the robber baron Google, okay, sorry, I'm adding color.
Yeah, you're ad-libbing.
But Jan Willem, no offense meant with the remark. It's a great question.
Okay, I mean, the answer to this one, there's a lot of answers to this one. Okay, I'm not going to get into the politics of it because essentially, if you're on the web to market, it is what it is. These are the tools. Are you going to change Google's philosophy? If you think you can as a person, you're welcome to it, but the rest of us pretty much have to work with what it is. So you knowingly make some decisions. But that's a very hard answer, okay? So let's go into a softer one. Essentially, we are seeing that Google is taking presumed traffic away from websites by providing a quick answer on search. And my response to this is that if you were relying on traffic coming to your website, having to troll through a page, or maybe two, to look for that quick answer and providing you with page views in return, then that's a bad business model. It's a bad end user experience. This is not how you're actually going to get people who'll be excited about what you do and who may become leads and give you business. So, if Google can use your answer, your data, to provide a quick answer, great, that's fantastic, because there's always a link where it came from. And that website which provides that answer gains in authority, reputation, credibility, and Google says so. So suddenly you have Google saying you're really cool and people should trust you. So I think you gain a lot. Yeah.
That's exactly the response. It was funny that that happened right during, I think it was SMX West, and one of the Moz personnel put up a quick tweet and said, like, well, looky here, Google's stealing from us now, and put a link to that knowledge graph result, which was taken from an FAQ that they had. In fact, and Cyrus Shepard came back the next day, Cyrus Shepard from Moz here, came back and said, look, if Google's going to do this, if they're going to be putting up this kind of information, better our brand name up there at the top than somebody else's.
Yes.
Another way of looking at it.
Well, and the thing is, you really shouldn't build your business model around leveraging public domain data as a way of getting traffic, right?
Which is mostly what they're putting up in those one boxes and knowledge graph, right? It's not
right. It is a very difficult basis. I mean, look, I know people who made fortunes, rendering public domain data, but there's nothing that says that Google can't render it as well. So, okay, we've all heard about the Harvard School of Business. Is there going to be a Google School of Business?
You're in it.
You are in it.
Well, exactly. I mean, here it is. And that's Scott Scowcroft asking that. And I think, Scott, essentially, given the fact that we discussed so many things of what Google does, it impacts on our behavior and our understanding. And then we work to basically work within that sphere. I think we're in it already. You're absolutely, Mark is right. Absolutely right.
We're talking about keeping those phrases, that consistent branding in there that helps people.
Well, exactly.
I keep hoping Google's listening when you say that, David.
So in here, there can be no DMA show without that phrase, and Mark is right again.
This all works on the day when we can type into Google. So who's right? And the one box answers Mark.
Excellent.
Doesn't even have to say Mark Traphagen, because you just own Mark at that point.
My wife would get that taken down in a day.
Made a list, like a long list of places. Yeah, sure. Explain these things then. Okay, so another question from the audience here, from Peter Halfley. Here's this. Oh, good comment. I saw this one too. Here's a secret. Authority results in higher ranking, and semantics is the lifeblood of this authority. Match more words in the pool, the more likely G will think you are the right answer. I think it's probably finishing the sentence.
Authority, yeah.
Authority. And it's worth commenting on that, because what I don't want people to take away from that is that we're back to keyword stuffing. That's not what we mean. But so when we talk about matching more words in the pool, we're talking about semantic level matches, right? And just sort of something, consistency in what you're writing about and the topic matter, and
building rich context around the things you're talking about, right?
Right, with logical synonyms being a part of it. You don't have to repeat the phrase, left-handed golf clubs 12 times on a page to rank for that. But you're probably going to use, you might call it the set, and you actually mean the set of golf clubs, or the set of clubs at one point, and you might call them lefties at another, and but the content is semantically rich and reinforces the basic theme in many ways.
Yes, exactly.
And so does the environment in which you surround it. Right? It's not a one-off page on a site that otherwise has nothing to do with left-handed golf clubs or golf clubs even. It just it's on a golfing site. It's links from other golfing sites, that kind of stuff that really reinforces it.
And this is all obvious stuff, really. I mean, in a real-world setting, we wouldn't really be discussing any of this. We'd be taken as given. And I think it says a lot about the way we marketed in the past, that we actually have to spell all these things out now. Because in the past, pretty much anything went, because it was the web, right? And everything, pretty much anything did go. But not anymore. And that's what really has to come across.
Like this comment too. So schema from Denver Prophet Jr. again. I define schema markup as how well you give directions to someone that's lost. Saying turn right at Joe's garage isn't giving specific directions. Actually, I prefer to tell them to turn right at the third pebble in terms of trying to be helpful. But yes.
Well, maybe it's more like the old joke about the farmer in Maine when you ask him where something is, and he says, "I can't get there from here."
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and I think within that comment, John Van Driel pretty much earlier said something which is very important. He said we implement schema markup in order to help search understand or help machines understand what we do, not the other way around. And that's very true. We're just trying to establish clarity and consistency. That's all it is. It's a communication device. And we need to bear this in mind. It's not for machines to teach us a language. It's for us to teach machines what we mean. And this can be done either using semantic markup or using content very consistently, but we still have to do it. And this is the intent.
No, absolutely. So we're out of immediate questions. If somebody has a question they want to fire, you can do that quickly, but I think we're going to go into wrap-up mode here. David, do you want to share some closing comments?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to be seeing more and more conversations about semantic markup as we go forward. And it is quite possible also that Google will start repositioning some of its indexing in terms of announcements on this. But ultimately, it's all about that clarity in content, in identity, in branding, and how we achieve those same old things: trust, authority, reputation, how we actually build them. And that takes time, it takes effort, and it does take persistence, and we need to bear this in mind.
Mark, you want to add something?
Well said. I don't have much to add to that. I think this has been really helpful, though. I really appreciate it, David. You give such a balanced consideration to these things. And we see, people kind of, as you said early on in the discussion, you see people grab something like this. Too many people are looking for the next, what's the next keyword stuff? And we can't keyword stuff anymore. So what can we do that's just like, we can just do it mechanically? So maybe if we put a markup on the page, maybe that'll help us rank higher. You said it so well earlier when you said that anything that you see as a shortcut, Google will either already figure it out 6 months ago that it was a shortcut, or they'll very quickly figure it out. It's not going to work that way. But you've given a very balanced perspective on this. You've given the reasons why it's good to know about it. It's good to implement if you can. But also why it's not some kind of panic, like, oh my God, if I'm not doing, every bit of markup in the book, I have no chance.
Yeah, and I'm going to start by giving a quick shout out to some of my favorite women on Google+, Kristen Drysdale, Candice Marco, Cheryl Deuce, and everybody else that we saw there in the comment stream. Thanks so much for being with us. I just want to remind people that if you aren't going to be able to deal with schema, or you don't have the time, or you're not technical enough, I want to go back to David's very sage advice early on. Think about learning from the schema specs about the kind of information that search engines are interested in. Don't kill yourself trying to do the code. Just make sure that the right pages on your website have that information, because Google is pretty good at picking it up. Obviously, they implemented schema because it makes it easier for them, but Google, Bing, and Yahoo all know that it's a minority of publishers that are ever going to be able to do that. So it's very useful to understand, here's the information we're looking for, and get it on your web page, and you will actually be taking advantage of structured data, just not using the spec. So with that, that's it for the Digital Marketing Answers show for this week. And first time ever, unfortunately, we're not going to have a Digital Marketing Excellence show this week. so unhappy about that, but the schedule out for it. So we will be back next week with another DMA show and with the DMA show back online. So have a great week, everybody. Signing off here from Seattle.
And also just a reminder that we are here at SMX Advanced for the next couple of days. I'm sure Eric and I will be from time to time posting some things from here, videos, photos, little quotes from people that we meet. So be watching our streams here on Google Plus to get the lowdown on what's happening here as well.
Take care.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.